Welcome to our 31st March 2022 coaching call. Oh my goodness. This month went by so quickly. Guys, the month went by so quickly. It is just incredible. Amazing month, wonderful things. I hope it was the same for all of you. So let's dive right into it. We are continuing with our monitoring focus, but we're also having some final thoughts on the Science of Getting Rich series. I highly recommend listening to these videos over and over again because this series has just been incredible. And there are amazing things to come during this year, but this is a really good one. I think that really provides a foundational principle for the Science of Getting Rich. So let's talk about monitoring. We're continuing our series on the best ways to have oversight as a monitor. And we're going to talk about checking the accuracy and completeness of ECRF entry, source documents, and trial-related documents. And that we have to do this by verifying that the protocol and the data required by the protocol is being captured on the CRFs and is consistent with source documents. So with the CRFs, whether it's the eCRFs in the online database, really making sure that the information that has been captured in that database reflects what is actually happening at the site. And then looking at the source documents at the site, and that is basically all the data that is actually being captured, right? The other thing we also have to make sure is that that's the first source of the data, okay? Because we always minimize errors, and we also want to make sure that things are being reported accurately in a way that we know that the data has integrity. So if I'm at a clinical research site and I notice that and I hear something like, or I'm on a call, I could be remote, I could be there, and I hear something like, yeah, we had captured this data somewhere else and then we transferred it. You're going to want to ask for those original documents where it was actually captured initially. So you always want to go to the first source, the first point in which that data was captured, because if it's not, then we don't know, right? I mean, maybe when it was being transcribed, there was so much room for error. I have had a situation where we had some audit findings where there was an investigator who would do his notes, his progress notes, and then out of that, he would take the information and capture it in the source data. And so we basically had to make sure that it was explained that the first source of the data was those progress notes where he would transcribe things. I mean, he had access to it, right? All the transcriptions, and that the source was not the first point. It was captured and then put on the source document. So those are just want to watch out for you as you're looking for accuracy in the data actually being captured, but you're also wanting to make sure that it's the first point of capture, and that minimizes the risk that the data is not accurate. Okay, and then we talked about dosing and therapy. Any modifications? I mean, if the protocol warrants that things have to be captured, the patient has to be dosed in a certain way, the device has to be implanted in a certain way, whatever it is, we have to make sure that they're doing it according to protocol. And if there are modifications, right, then we also have to make sure that is actually captured. And that includes, so the product that is being taken, any other modifications that has to be captured. Then we all know adverse events and conmeds and any intercurrent illnesses have to be reported with the protocol and on the CRFs. And that is based on what protocol we're doing, what therapeutic indication it is, right? If there's certain adverse events that are expected, and that's a whole different ballgame. But if there are things that are not specified by the protocol, the norm is that we absolutely have to report them. So just pay attention to what the requirements are per the protocol. There's a lot involved. When you look at the adverse events and conmed section and what has to be captured, is typically very elaborate, right? I mean, all the different therapies that are allowed, that are not allowed, and any types of adverse events that are being captured, those that are not required. So these are very important things because safety is the key to our success in clinical trials. And we have to make sure that we're showing that oversight. So it's really, yeah, of course, we want to make sure the CRFs are accurate again, that the tests, the subjects fail to make, if stuff is not being done, then it has to be clearly reported. So it's two things, right? If there are things that have to be done and they're not being done, we have to report them. But if there are also additional things that are being done that are not required by the protocol, there has to be a justification for them being done. So always remember that it's not so much, it's that things might be absent and there also might be things that are present that are actually not required. And then normally any subjects who withdraw from the trial, they drop out, we have to make sure that we are accurately capturing that. That's really important because, data is analyzed in a certain way, right? And every piece matters. Okay, so errors, omissions on the CRFs, as you know, if you're great clinical research professionals, you want to make sure that if there are corrections, the additions that are made or they're deleted or dated, we have to make sure that it's initial, it's dated. Is typically we say you line through initial and dated. And of course, we have to make sure that there is an explanation, right? And it's the authorized personnel who are making those changes. It's not just somebody off the street who's coming and changing things, right? It is someone who is authorized. Say you have certain data that was captured by the pharmacist regarding the dispensation of drug, then you notice that it's somebody completely different who is not a pharmacist, who's not been assigned to monitor the drug dispensing, monitor the complete all the logs, then you will have to look into that. So it's not just that if there deletions or there are certain entries that have to be corrected. Okay, let me put it this way. For example, there's an entry that is made by the investigator himself or herself, and then you notice that the study coordinator came and lined through it and then initial and dated. That's a red flag, right? Because it's not that person who initially made that entry. Why is it a completely different person, right? Or if they're not tasked to actually do that. So you guys get it. Those are things that you want to think about. You have to be extremely detailed oriented, especially as a monitor. When you're monitoring data, you're reviewing all of this. You really have to be detail oriented and pay attention and understand that this one entry, does it affect so many other documents? I'm looking at, say, a subject in a screening log. That's a log where the activities of the patients are being captured on. And I noticed that there is one patient that is entered on the screening log that it is discontinued on a specific date. And then someone just like lined through and said, no, they will not discontinue on that date. But as I'm looking at the source document, I'm looking at the database, the ECRFs, they actually were discontinued on that date due to specific things. So I always just think, okay, this information that I'm looking at, all the errors and omissions and additions, right? All the things that are going on, can I justify it? Can I justify it? And how do I justify it? I have to have an objective view of all the documents that are actually involved in it. Of course, adverse events always have to be captured. We talked about that they're being reported within the specific time frame. That is so important. Are they being reported do you understand the requirements for the ethics committee or the institutional review board and the sponsor? So the sites have to be aware of that, and we have to make sure that they're adhering to these reporting timeframes. We have to make sure that all the essential documents are actually being maintained. That's important. And again, many times in monitoring, this is something that is forgotten. And I always stress, we have to ensure that at minimum, even if you have to take a look at a few pages of the investigational site file, that is so important. There have been a lot of cases where we're now doing a lot more remote monitoring, whether it's due to COVID-19 or the nature of the industry, but that does not stop one from looking at those investigational site files, at minimum checking in to say, hey, is the site file up to date with the study coordinator? If there are documents that was site, you want to ensure, of course, if there have been any changes, they have any documents that they can provide copies, right, to you. And And then when you're back at the clinical research facility, then you take the time to actually look at those documents. We have mentioned deviations before. Any deviation or SOPs and GCPs have to be reported, and then we take appropriate action to prevent recurrence. So we're always looking at issues from a perspective of, okay, this issue has occurred, but that's not the end. How do we mitigate the risk? How do we ensure that downstream, right, the same anymore? So that's it for today. Again, we're just really making sure that we are maintaining oversight as great clinical research professionals, looking at the data, ensuring that there's data integrity, that we, patients are safe participating in clinical trials. And if we keep doing that, then we'll be successful in everything that we do. So we're gonna go into the getting rich off. And again, this series has just been incredible. Wallace D. Wattles definitely changed my life with his book. And I've been listening and reading this for years, going through a period where I started listening to it every single day. I think it was in 2021. So we're end of March 2022. And I've been listening to it for a while, and I intend to go over it for the next year, because every time that I listen to it, there's something new that actually comes forth. So it's such a great read, and there's a lot to learn from it. So some thoughts are that when you practice this types of ideas, that riches are something that you form, you imprint on this intelligent substance, and that it comes forth, then industrial system or government can stop it. That's what he's saying. Your mind is not something that anybody can take from you. Doesn't matter where you are, doesn't matter what is going on, you will be okay. And then you always want to remember to operate from the creative plane, not the competitive plane. We're here to create because we're unique individual expressions of the divine, that nobody can come and do what you're doing. Nobody can come and live the life the way you're doing. Nobody can give service the way that you're giving it. And that applies to every human being on this planet. And again, just a reminder that we do not plan for future urgencies. I always have this thing where I say, Tengu Muna, what are you going to do in the next 24 hours? What do you want to experience? What do you want to do, right? And then, of course, he says that we got to give thanks to obstacles. We have to give thanks for solutions for obstacles. Super important, something I also practice. I give thanks that this current situation has already been resolved, and now I'm aligning myself with the solution. Okay. He says, give no anxious thought to possible disasters, obstacles, panic, unfavorable combinations of circumstances. Because really, can you imagine the fantasies and scenarios that we always create? And I found throughout my life that things did not get as bad as I thought that they would. If they were that bad, I would not be sitting here, at the end of March 2022. So never admit failure. Do not accept all situations as their final. Now we're going to be looking at one of Neville Goddard's books coming up later. And I've learned a lot from this, that he always talks about don't accept the situation as final. Reject whatever is going on and say, this is not final. And it's true, because things are constantly evolving. Well, no matter how disastrous things seem, always remember that, change will come. And if you live long enough and go through it, whatever you're going through that day, by the time that you hit your bed at night, you're going to reset, right? So things are constantly evolving and growing, and there was always a solution. And he says that never admit failure. Do not attempt that all situations are final, and then rise above doubt, avoid complaints, release fear and anxiety, become aware of your thoughts. You always want to rise above that. We're basically calibrating ourselves to higher levels of vibration so that we can attract the things at that level of vibration. That's really what we're doing. There is never a failure, because there are always better things coming. And that is, I even give thanks for some of the things that did not happen in my life, because what I found is that something better was there for me. And if I was so caught up with, this didn't pan out, this didn't work, I've come to realize that what I've asked for is on its way to me, and that this universe is just busy, looking for the least, they say, the path of least resistance. Because I have so much stress within me, that means stress. It's, oh my goodness, am I going to do this? What will happen? And so that's what's stopping myself to rise to a higher level of vibration. And so this wonderful universe, God, the source, your soul, your spirit is constantly looking for ways to surprise you, but it has to go through the path of least resistance. Okay. So that's what we want to pay attention to. So we want, again, the world needs people. We want to evolve consciously. We cannot hold back our skills and talents, right? And we want to do our work each day in such a way we talked about. Okay. Last week, I'm just repeating this, and they don't want to wait for opportunity to come. You want to rise up all the opportunities that have come to your life. Okay. So then the final thought process is this. There is a thinking stuff from which all things are made, and which in its original state permeates, penetrates, and fills the interspaces of the universe. A thought in this substance produces the thing that is imaged by the thought. Man can form things in his thought, and by impressing his thought upon formless substance, can cause the thing he thinks about to be created. In order to do this, man, human, woman, whatever, right, must pass from the competitive to the creative mind. Otherwise, he cannot be in harmony with the form intelligence, which is always creative and never competitive in spirit. Okay, so those are the final thoughts. Again, this is the end of the works of Wallace D. Wattles. And we, just to recap, we continue on monitoring, really focus on doing our due diligence to ensure that the clinical research facilities are capturing data that is integral to the protocol, right? It's safe. And then the sense of getting rich, that the final thoughts of the advancing human being, we're evolving, we're growing, we are becoming greater and greater expressions of ourselves, and that we are calibrating to higher levels of vibration to allow the things that are at those levels to actually come to you. So I hope you guys enjoyed this series. I have most certainly loved it. Continue to learn it, because every time that I learn, something new comes forth. And so next week, we're going to continue with our monitoring, but we're going to be diving into some newer things that I've prepared for, and they're going to be so exciting. Okay. We'll see you then.